Hello, and welcome to the fifth episode of our 100 Days of Magic. So, 95 days left to go. Just think of how much ground we will cover together in our epic adventure in learning how to spend more of your time building a magical life. That's why I'm doing these classes 15 minutes a day, every day. Because quite frankly, if you want to live magically, living magically means building magical habits that can support creating a magical worldview and making choices that help you align with spirit. So my name is Donna Woodwell. I own this place. Hello, Barris. I'm glad you are here, and I'm glad someone said something because that means I'm not talking to no one. Today in lesson 5, we are going to be talking about cosmographs, Qabala, and magic. So before we get started, just wanted to make sure that you are all welcome here. You're welcome to ask your questions if you happen to be attending live, or if you're watching the replay, feel free to ask them in the comments section there, and I will get back to them. We are all in this learning together, which means we can learn from each other. So it's not just learning from me, it's me holding space for us to have interesting conversations about our magical journeys together. Over these 100 days, I'm going to be covering a lot of different topics, but in this first collection, this first week or two, I'm giving some basic foundational concepts so that I can make sure that as we go into the more complicated stuff, you can begin to use the language of magic to see how all the pieces fit together. And since I don't know where everyone's coming from a different place, I want to make sure we at least have a common ground to start our conversation. Hello, Claudia. Glad you are here. Okay, so today in our conversations about cosmographs, Qabala, and magic. What is a cosmograph? A cosmograph is a fancy academic word that just means a model of the cosmos. I love the word because it encapsulates a huge collection of things. Now, humans have been looking up at the great, big, endless mystery of the cosmos. The night sky filled with stars, closing our eyes, that infinite space inside of us, and wondering what it all means and how it all fits together. Hello, Nancy. Hello, Christine. Having to deal with the infinite is an incredibly difficult thing for the human mind to conceive of. We don't have the capacity to experience true infinity. It's a nonsensical thing to us because as human creatures, we are very aware of our limits. We're aware of the limits of our own skin. We're aware of the limits of our perception. We're aware that someday we're going to die, the limits of our lifespan. And so in order to tackle even thinking about an infinite cosmos with all of its possible permutations, humans have set about making models of the cosmos. Those models we call cosmographs. You could write a thesis. You could write a dissertation on this topic. I'm sure someone has done so already. One sec. Hey, Pat, welcome. So, in this collection of maps of the cosmos, you can divide up what we think of as common maps in the Western world today into 3 overarching categories. One category is I'm just going to call them metaphysics because they're about models of a reality beyond the physical. The first metaphysics is that we live here in a physical-only material world and there's nothing else. I can call it the Flatland model if you would like. It's the only real thing is the kickable stuff of our lives. A lot of modern science adopts a materialist model because at this moment in time, it's very difficult for us to measure or quantify things that are non-physical and abstract. You can't quantify things like, love and happiness or hate. Those are all, they're abstract concepts. Beyond that, how do you quantify spirit or God? Those are just huge things that science just sort of, we don't know how to measure it, we won't have it in the equation, which becomes there is only the physical. I would imagine most people in this group listening to me are not adherents to the Flatland model, because talking about astrology, talking about magic, talking about spirituality, none of these things make sense at all when you are talking from a Flatland point of view. Flatland is actually a name of a book that was written at the end of the 19th century. It's an allegory for the political situation in the UK at the time. But in the book, three-dimensional creatures magically appear in Flatland, and they can only see slices of them as they move through Flatland. And there's much discussion about, how to even conceive of this extra-dimensional creature. So that's why science and people who have a materialistic background have a really difficult time engaging in conversations with people about astrology, about religion, about anything that transcends our materialistic world. Now, not all scientists believe like that. I'm just saying that from that metaphysical perspective, it's very difficult to approach things that operate in a different way. So the second kind of metaphysics, what some people call dualism. So this idea that, yes, there's a material plane down here that we're all moving around and interacting with, but somewhere out there, way far away, transcendent, is a higher spiritual reality. And there's this huge gap between where we are down here and out there at that transcendent reality. So huge that we either cannot cross it, or it requires some kind of intervention. Much of fundamentalist Christianity works on this kind of model, that God is real, but way out there, and we can't possibly connect to God unless we have the intercession of our faith in Jesus. And it's through that intercession that we are allowed to cross that giant gulf. Okay? So a lot of people in the West have grown up with some kind of lurking dualism in our cultural DNA, because so much of the Western world is based on this dualistic model of us down here, humans bad, spirit up there, really good, but transcendent. And the lingering effects of this results in us feeling like I am abandoned by the universe. I am all by myself. I am locked in my little head. I am worthless. I am not divine. And maybe if I just say or do the right things, I will be saved someday. And that constant looking for salvation creates an awful lot of challenges in our world. Or worse, where, wait, I know the way to be saved. Is it my responsibility now to go out and share this with other people so that they can be saved too? Or if they're not saved, then they're somehow evil, and maybe I have the right to get rid of them because they are interfering with my process of connecting to the divine. All that craziness comes out of a dualistic perspective. Other things that come out of the dualist perspective, when you get the sense that there is a hierarchy of being, body bad, spirit good, that hierarchy can be imposed on all kinds of other things. White is better than black. American is better than anywhere else on the planet. Boy is better than girl. Just fill in the blanks. All those isms, todos los ismos, as my Latin American studies professor used to call them, are based on a dualistic model of the cosmos, that there's two poles and one must be better than the other one. So we have that as a model that we have to accept has been part of our culture, because if we don't accept that it's been there, we can't deal with it. And then there's the third metaphysics, which actually might be the oldest metaphysics around. The idea that there is one thing. All of this is part of the one thing. And whether you call the one thing in its divine oneness, the one, the divine, the source, whatever you call it, from that original oneness overflowed itself, kind of like the rays overflow the sun, to become more and more and more diverse. So from that oneness, through all of these series of what are called emanations in scholarly writing, eventually produced all of the stuff down here. All right? This is a very holistic vision. Certainly different from a dualistic concept because it's one thing out of which we emerge and are therefore still connected. All right? So from that point of view, of that divine oneness of all things, that very holistic worldview, emerged all of our spirit sciences. So astrology, alchemy, tarot, magic, all the things that we talk about in our crossroads rely on that third metaphysics as the basis for their reality. But there's also a lot of other implications too. The implications like, what does being saved mean when you're not disconnected from the divine in the first place? What exactly are you being saved from? So these are big questions that shift depending on what metaphysical model that you are using to navigate your reality. Okay. So let's talking about the Qabala. The Qabala is one of these cosmographs. It's a direct descendant from the cosmographs that were created in the Egyptian world, which filtered down into in the late classical period. There were these folks called the Neoplatonists who were making models of the cosmos. Plotinus was really good at it. The Gnostics had their own model. But out of this cauldron where the culture, the intellectual culture, was talking about what these models should look like, grew the Qabala. And the Qabala is really central to us today in magic because it's the model that survived in the most intact way as part of Western culture, kept alive by the mystics of the Jewish tradition for about 1,000 years before it got reintegrated back into the other elements, the Christian elements, the pagan elements of Western thought. And why it's so very important is that every book that we have on magical studies, this one happens to be the magnum opus of Agrippa. All of these weird, strange glyphs, tables with Hebrew letters and all that kind of stuff, all of that is based, you can't read it, you can't understand what they're talking about until you understand Qabala and what the model means. And so, since pretty much all the magic that's written in all these books back there draw a direct line to this, you can't understand the language in which magic is written in the West if you do not understand what the Qabala is. So basically, the Qabala describes a reality that starts with the one, and how the one becomes two, and how that divine two-ness eventually creates the creative tension to manifest everything we see down here in the middle of in the physical world through a series of stages. And it's this recognition of unity in creative polarity that underscores how, from the point of view of the Qabala and the central image it uses, the tree of life, creates all the things that we experience. And so using the Qabala means learning how creation occurs, how we get from one to many, and it also underscores how you can use the technology of us to move toward greater levels of enlightenment, because it maps out all the steps along the way. Simple example. If anything in this is simple, really. So we are down here having physical experiences, but we can loosely divide up our brain into the thoughts that we're thinking and the emotions and the desires that produce them, right? And our idea of an imagination space in between, being created by the tension between our intellect and our desires, in order to hold open a space for the divine to shine into us. We talked about this in the second session on the magical mindset. Well, that's Qabala. So you've already been learning Qabala just by listening to me talk. And when you recognize these kinds of things and all the ways the different parts of the mind are connected, you can begin to use them more creatively with different meditations and mental exercises in order to allow the different parts of your experience to exist together more co-creatively. You realize that you are not having thoughts, that you are the one directing what you are thinking, that you are shaping your emotions, that together you can use them to break through the veils that create the illusion that you are down here in the bottom of a well and that light at the top is very far away. You can start climbing out of that hole, so to speak, and begin to see reality for what it is. So, learning Qabala is a great tool for any kind of magical practice because it taps into that third metaphysics and gives you concrete guidance for which steps will do what on your journey in a way that you can experiment with. It's not telling you to believe anything. It's providing propositions. Thoughts relates to emotions, the way black relates to white, or hot relates to cold, or up relates to down. They're not one is better than the other. That they are both created by the movement between two poles. And that in order to come to our final revelation, it's always about learning how to work with the diversity and find the common ground between them. Just think how much different our world would be if we could all respect that people who don't think the way we do aren't bad, they're not evil, they're not demonized. They are simply holding open the other side of that set of polarities, which gives us the opportunity to find the common ground in between us as long as we continue to establish a dialogue. Okay? So, Qabala and magic, huge implications. We're going to be talking more about Qabala in future sessions, but I wanted to start with that as a first concept because it is, along with astrology, one of the pivotal languages of magic. And unlike astrology, especially in this group, you may not have heard of it before, and you may not have even considered it before. So when I come back tomorrow, because we're out of time for today, we're going to talk about the application of Qabala that you're probably more familiar with. It's called tarot. In essence, tarot is practical Qabala. I will reveal that in our next session. But for now, I'm Donna Woodwell. So glad you tuned in to my lesson today of, my sign, 100 Days of Magic. It's my pleasure to be here with all of you. If you've got any questions about really anything, feel free to put them in the comments underneath this video. If you find this video useful, feel free to post this wherever you want. The thing about our sessions here in the Crossroads, it's why I'm broadcasting here as opposed to someplace else, everything is public, so you can broadcast this any place that you want. On Facebook, I don't mind at all. Feel free to continue the conversation with your friends. And I hope you will begin to see examples of these cosmographs in your own life. So if I leave you with homework for today, it is this. Ask yourself, which one of these metaphysics, metaphysics 1, Flatland, metaphysics 2, the dualistic perspective, or metaphysics 3, you find a most common background in your life? Or maybe you find certain elements of the way you think about things fit into one metaphysics and certain elements fit into other metaphysics. And be honest with yourself. Get out your journals and ask yourself how this has been affecting your life. Because I think if you are really honest with yourself, you will find it's affected your life in ways that you hadn't really considered before. Hence, why having a model is so very useful. It gives you a tool to think about things in different ways. That's why we need multiple models. But in ways you might not have been able to think of if you didn't have some kind of guiding principles to help get the ball started. Okay? So, thank you all. Again, if you got questions, feel free to add them in the chat. I love talking to all of you. Talk to each other. And I will see you in our next lesson tomorrow when we, as I said, are going to be talking about how tarot is kind of the graphic novel of Kabbalah. Take care, everyone.